What's going on, guys? It's Matt from RC Overload, and today, well, actually I should say this week, we are working on the SCX10 II a little bit, doing some hop-ups, modifying, and upgrades, so to speak, in a sense, making it better than it was. Let's put it that way. Anyways, today, you guys, I ordered up a whole bunch of STRC aluminum upgrades for the Axial SCX10 II. And today I wanted to show you guys how to put those in and what they are that I was putting in this. So it's kind of like a mix of a tutorial video, but also a mix of showing you guys what it is that I put in on this. Now, all these parts are gunmetal gray, so that way you guys know exactly what it is color-wise that I'm putting in. For those of you that may have never heard of STRC, they are a company strictly for aluminum upgrades. Some of the best stuff I've ever come across in the industry. I have them actually on quite a few different vehicles. So I've always been quite impressed by them, and I figured, you know what, let's do quite a few of them on this one and make it look badass, right? So let's get you guys in, show you exactly what it is that we put on the Axial SCX10 II, as well as a little bit of a breakdown of a tutorial of how to replace each part that I put in this. Because some of you guys may have gotten the ready to run and aren't quite sure how to install these parts, and hopefully this will give you guys a little bit of an idea so you're not afraid to do it yourself. Alright, let's get into it. So check it out. What we are replacing on the Axial SCX10 II today is going to include some of the following parts. You're going to be looking at rear axle lockouts, diff covers, lower link mounts, the front hubs and knuckles, shock towers, and even frame supports. Now, a lot of this is going to be more cosmetic, but a lot of it, especially on the axle themselves, is going to be a huge upgrade in the suspension and handling of the truck itself. So with that being said, let's get into actually showing you how to replace all of this. Okay, so the first thing you're going to want to do is remove the set screw off the wheel hex and the screw off the lockout itself. Once you've done that, pull the lockout off the axle and inspect the axle shaft itself for any damage, or maybe just add a little extra grease to it. Now, reinstall the new aluminum lockout back onto the axle housing in the same direction that you had pulled it off. And reinstall both screws once again to finish it up. Now do this for both sides. Next, we're going to be removing the rear diff cover. There's four screws on the back side of the housing itself. Use a screwdriver to pry off the housing cover and inspect the inner axles gears for any damage, or re-grease if necessary. Now, looking at the actual housing cover on the aluminum piece, you'll notice it looks exactly like the factory plastic one. So there's no need for any modifying or any changes to the housing itself. It'll slide right in just like the original one. Once you've done that, re-bolt it up using the 4 screws on the back side of the housing. Next, we're going to be replacing the lower rear links mounts. There's 2 screws that hold the mount on, and you have the shock and the lower link. Remove all of that and now pull it off. You'll notice on the new aluminum piece that there's screw threads on one side of it. Make sure that those threads are pointed in towards the axle shaft itself, not outside. Once you've done that, you'll have a rear axle that looks something similar to this. Now, the next thing that we're going to be doing is replacing the front end components. Now, I've showed you already a few of the parts that are getting replaced, so there's no need to repeat that. But this time we're going to be replacing the C-hubs and outer knuckles. The first thing that you're going to want to do is remove the wheel hex nut again. Then remove both upper and lower screws that hold down the knuckle onto the C-hub. Pull both the knuckle and the drive shaft out of it, and remove the lower screw that hold on the C-hub from the axle. Again, inspect everything for damage or add extra grease if you need to. Next, install the new aluminum C-hub and make sure it's facing in the same direction that you had taken it off. Now these are angled slightly, so make sure that you have the correct angle when you're putting it in. You can tell by comparing it with the original that's still on the other side and making sure that it lines up correctly. After that, reinstall your drive shaft with some more grease put back into it for protection. Next, we're going to be installing the outer knuckle. Now, I found that by putting the inner bearing on the knuckle onto the axle shaft itself first made installing the knuckle a lot easier. So go ahead and do that first. Still keep the outer bearing in the knuckle, as it does help with guiding everything into place. Once you've done that, it's now time to put the screws back in. But now that the screws are going into an aluminum housing instead of plastic, it's best to put some Loctite on the screw itself, as they do tend to back out after a few uses and being on the trail. If you're just screwing the screw into plastic, you don't need to worry about putting Loctite on it, as the plastic does grip the screw very well. Next, finish installing the steering linkage back into the knuckles themselves and bolt everything down. Once you've done that, you've completed the entire front end, once you've done both sides obviously, and it should look something like this. Now the next thing that we're going to be installing is the servo mounts. The first thing that you're going to want to do is remove the 2 screws that hold the mount on from the underside of the chassis. Unfortunately, I didn't show you on that part. But after that, there's going to be 3 screws, 2 in the front and 1 in the rear of the servo mounts that you're going to remove to pull the servo off the truck. Don't forget to pull the servo horn off as well. Once you do that, it's time to remove the plastic mount itself. And you got to do that by removing the shock tower on the driver's front. So we're going to pull the top part of the shock off and then remove both lower bolts holding the shock mount on the frame. Once you do that, the whole plastic mount assembly will come right out of the chassis and frame rail. Now, we are installing some new shock towers, so this is a good time to restart replacing them as well. Now you'll see on this one it already has the panhard bar mount set up on it. And again, installation goes in just the reverse way. Now with the new aluminum mounts for the servo, they come in 2 pieces. It's not one solid piece like it was before. So make sure you're holding everything together because it does get a little bit tricky. Once you do that, reinstall the servo back into place using a little bit of Loctite on the servo mounting screws. And again, put your servo horn back into position and make sure you center the steering as well. Moving on from that, we're going to be removing the front bumper mount off the frame. Now there are 2 screws, one on either side of it, that hold the mount in place. Go ahead and remove both those screws. Now I also noticed that there's a screw right behind the passenger side one that if you loosen it a little bit, helps make the frame go a little bit wider to make pulling the whole assembly right out a lot easier. You don't need to remove the screw entirely, but just loosen it enough to be able to pull the mount off. Now, taking a look at the new aluminum mount versus the old one, you'll notice that they look exactly the same. However, the new aluminum has some grooves on the underside where the top is nice and smooth. Again, make sure you put it in the correct direction. Smooth side goes up top. Now, put it back in just like how you had pulled it off, and when you push it in all the way, you should hear it kind of click in, as it does hold itself in position in 2 of the holes. Now, as you can see, I did replace the passenger side shock tower because I am right there and they're all getting replaced at the same time. Now, once you put your screws in, you should get something that looks like that. Moving on from the front, we are now moving to the back side. Now this time we're replacing a lot of components, so I'm pulling off both rear shocks and I'm pulling off both rear shock towers, as well as the center brace and the rear bumper mount. Now the center brace will slide out after you've loosened everything up and removed the rear bumper. The new mount does come with some new hardware, so you can use that stuff as the screws are a little bit shorter. Go ahead and reinstall all the parts the same way that you had taken them off. And again, the rear mount is going to be flat on one side and have a whole bunch of grooves and everything on the underside. Make sure the flat side goes up. Now finish installing all the screws and all the rest of the parts and you should finish up with something that looks like this. Again, depends on the color of aluminum that you put in. Now, as a side note, all the shock towers are the exact same as the stock. There's no extra mounting holes or anything extra like that, so it'll look identical to the originals. Now, this is a very easy installation, but like I had mentioned before, some of you may not be aware as to how to replace some of this, and hopefully you guys will find that useful. Well, that's it for now, you guys. Hopefully you found this tutorial useful and helpful. I'm pretty excited. It looks so much better than it did stock. Well, of course, they always look better when they're upgraded. But anyways, I can't wait to break this out and test it on the trail and actually see how much better this thing really does handle having all of those aluminum parts on it. There is a little bit more weight to the truck overall, which I like. The truck actually felt from out of the box very lightweight. And sometimes having more weight on the truck does help in certain situations. So, it's not a significant amount of weight, but it is a little bit noticeable. So, now that we've got those on there, they look cool. Some of them will do great. That is it for now. Friday we have a video coming out on some new tires and wheels for this thing, and then we're going to break this thing out into the trail and show you guys a cool running video. And if you guys have any questions or comments on the stuff that I put in, or you want more information on how to do something, feel free to let me know in the comment box, and I will try to get back to you as quickly as I can. And if you want to look at more of these products, I will post all the links down in the description box below. Feel free to check that out as well. Don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and share it. And until next time, guys, I will see you later on the next RC Overload. Later.